Hello, this is your host, Christina from Savvy Radio. Thank you for joining us for our Heartbeat of the World video series, where we're bringing you some of the top experts around the globe to talk about some of the greatest challenges facing our country and the world, and what we can all do to make the world a better place. Our guest today is David K. Jackson, pastor, life coach, motivational speaker, certified personal trainer, writer, and proud U.S. Marine, who served on the Elite Marine Security Guard Embassy Program. Today, Mr. David Jackson shares how to revolutionize your approach to life's obstacles. Find out more and pick up David's book, Life in the Second Half, at davidkjackson.com. Hi, David. Welcome back to Savvy Business Radio for our Heartbeat of the World video series. How are you today?
I am super, Christine. Best day of my life. And how are you today?
I'm doing fabulous. And this is take two for the audience that doesn't know. We have a bit of technical difficulties recording, but I thank you again for coming back. It's so important. You've done wonderful work in the world. You are a pastor. You are a life coach, as well as you had been a Marine. And so tell the audience a little bit, fill them in on your background a little bit on what brought you to where you are today and working as a pastor and coach.
Well, I would have to say, certainly thank you first and foremost, and we give God all the glory and all the honor for anything that has been done. I certainly can't take any credit for it. I guess the beginning, I started out as an Army dependent, Army brat, as they would call it. My mother was 16 years old when I was born. She ultimately married my stepfather, who was in the military. With that, we traveled. We lived in places as diverse as Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Benning, Georgia, Kissingen, West Germany, and Alabama, to include just a few. Ultimately, I graduated high school here in Alabama, joined the United States Marine Corps, ended up on embassy duty. And while on embassy duty, I was privileged and honored. My first post was Paris, France. Then after I was meritoriously, as they call it, honored to have served in Moscow, Russia. Then it was Moscow, USSR, Union Socialist and Soviet republics, as we know it. And it was a communist country at the time. And we went there, as I shared on yesterday, to relieve guys that had been involved in an espionage scandal. Say that 3 times fast. Yeah, and President Reagan, Secretary of State George Shultz, amongst others, decided they wanted the best of the best. In order to qualify to even be on the program, the MSG program, Marine Security Guard program, you had to be considered the top 10% of the United States Marine Corps. Wow. And so they made the decision that they wanted the top 10% of the top 10%. And I was just fortunate enough to have been one of 32 Marines that was then dispatched to Moscow, Russia, to relieve those guys.
And I would think, some of the things that were written in by our audience that really alarms them is our education system, how citizens can better get along, and also such things as economy. What have you seen as some of the things that really are a big catastrophe right now that we could work on as a citizenry? And do you have any solutions?
Personally, my thing is always going to be a personal challenge and to the individual. In other words, I want to see people work at changing and challenging those areas they can have a direct impact upon. In other words, I challenge people to win at your position. And when you begin winning at your position, ultimately, as my book, Life in the Second Half mentions, it is difficult to win against an opponent that you haven't prepared for or that you haven't studied. So when you begin to study yourself and you find the shortcomings within yourself, then it gives you the experience and the wisdom, as we mentioned on yesterday. Once you've encountered your own problems, when you encounter another that has a problem, it raises compassion. In other words, you're compassionate toward another's difficulty because you've had difficulties of your own and realized the difficulty, not only realized it, but overcame it.
Yeah. How would you advise people to start to get in touch with things they could reflect on and see is, because we talked yesterday about people really focusing on their failures, and you don't want to stay stuck on your failures. It's a negative state to be in. But at the same time, you don't know everything. Everyone could be better a person on a daily basis on their job and as a person. How could they start to reflect on what they could get better at and see where their weaknesses might be?
I think personal accountability, personal integrity, in other words, being honest with yourself. I think part of the problem is it's so difficult for me to look in the mirror and accept those challenges that I present. Now, the easy lot in life is to look at Christine's challenges. And I could point those out readily, A through Z and Z and back to A again.
Mm-hmm.
But the only person that I am equipped and have any remote possibility of changing is myself. Mm-hmm. And what we'll discover is the challenge, I believe, Christine, is that a majority of people are now have been enthralled into self-hatred, self-denial, lack of love, or whatever the term might be. We're not honoring the God within, the creator within, the jewel within, that diamond in the rough, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And until you dig inside and find that beauty within, everything else is gonna give the impression or the reflection of let's just say ugliness or disdain, perhaps.
Mm. Wow, that's amazing. So honestly, what it comes out to being sometimes, and this is interesting, many, many years ago, I had gone to a spiritual retreat, and they asked everyone to stand in a circle and one person to stand in the middle. And they said, for the person standing in the middle, I want everyone to go around the circle and say the first thing that comes to mind. And sometimes the word that came out of the person's mouth was rather negative, and the people in the middle would get very antagonistic or defensive, like, why are they saying that about me? And really, the whole exercise was really about what you say to another, or what is really a reflection about what you feel about yourself.
Absolutely. Incredible. In fact, I share with people, Christine, in a very similar fashion. I talk about projection and reflection. Projection and reflection. In other words, life is a mirror. But what you see in the mirror is simply a reflection of the projection that is in the mirror. And so if negativity comes before you and you know that it doesn't represent Christine, it doesn't represent a member of the audience, you have a right to dismiss it. Now, here's a challenge. If that negativity is you, then you're arbitrarily challenged to examine it, because in the book, The Secret, the whole message in The Secret was you draw you to you. Mm-hmm. And whatever the negativity is, it is a reflection of you. So it came with a purpose. Now it's up to you to define that purpose, or you can dismiss it and miss the lesson. Mm. But I've discovered, and my grandfather would say that every test that you fail, you'll be made to try it again until you get it right.
Way to put it. And I think a lot of the times what we are so negative about is stuff that we're scared to look at, our shadow, as it's been called in Jungian terms. And really, I think people can beat themselves up. It's much easier to see the fault in someone else and not look at it yourself, because you want to beat yourself up. So let's just be mean to someone else. But really, it's really not about beating yourself up. It's about really clearly, honestly, seeing where you could make things better and not beating yourself up, forgiving yourself for those shortcomings, and how can I move forward? And with me, I can't move forward without God's help. I mean, not everyone will say they believe in God, but for me, that's the way to help me move forward. And when I left corporate, one of the things that helped me was being able to reflect more and be with God and myself, like to be in prayer. It allowed me to help forgive myself and reflect on my shortcomings. How have you seen it work with you and your clients?
I've seen it work in the sense that from a personal perspective and a personal challenge to those that I counsel or coach, for lack of a better term, I'm constantly challenging them as well as myself to understand that I talk about the 3A approach to a second half, and that is acknowledgement. We have to first acknowledge that the problem exists. Then we have to accept the problem. Mm-hmm. You own it. It's yours. And then the key and the most important part of the 3A approach is to address it. Mm-hmm. Therefore, here it is again. You have to acknowledge it. You have to accept it. Then you have to address it. And the question is, how long, and I asked the question one time, how long will you continue to allow Satan to rob you of your dreams, rob you of your destiny, rob you of your future? Because of something that somebody 20 years, 15 years, 50 years, 60 years, 6 minutes ago perhaps may have done. But what you'll discover is as long as you give them the power, they maintain the power. The challenge in the second half is to take back your power. Well, David, how do I take back my power? Good question. You take back your power when those things that were intended to imprison you, you change your mindset. And for those of us that are Christians, we understand in Romans 12:1 that the Bible says, be therefore transformed by the renewal of your mind. Mm-hmm. When you begin to transform your mind, there's a cliche that I share, Christina, and it simply says that when you renew your mind, you transform your life.
That's awesome.
Renew your mind, transform your life.
Wow. And one thing I found, and it's very interesting, whether you're Christian or not, one major issue is forgiveness. And often it's not forgiveness for others, it's forgiveness for yourself. And people just beat themselves up with guilt and shame, which I find can be a positive negative emotion in that you can acknowledge I feel shameful and guilty and then move on. But why do we often stay stuck in those negative emotions like guilt and shame instead of moving forward? Is it just what you were mentioning, that we're listening to those voices of past people or events or something like that?
Well, to answer your question, an awesome statement, and I'm certainly inclined to agree. My challenge, my perspective on it is this. We oftentimes find it easier, and I'm challenged by this, and I'm doing some research as we speak on it as well. Why is it that we are so inclined to look at the negative aspect of anything rather than the positive aspect of it? And both exist. You can go negative, but just as sure as the glass is half empty, it is also most certainly half full. And I share with people, even in life in the second half, it is your vantage point that determines your view. And coming full circle back to where you began, self-hatred, and when you allow whatever that event was. Yesterday we talked about the it factor, and the it factor from the Bible was that woman with the alabaster box. Mm-hmm. And I reminded you that Scripture recorded, and when they saw her with it, they had indignation. Is how Scripture is recorded. Mm-hmm. They had indignation with her, and here the challenge is we have to understand that our enemies oftentimes are aware of our gifts and our abilities and our talents a lot more certain than we are. But once the enemy understands and identifies your talent, see, the enemy understands that Christine, on the day to the hour, the moment that you become proficient or professional in your talent, your gift, your ability, you then put the enemy on notice. You become a threat to the enemy. Mm-hmm. So what opponent in their right mind would want to see Christine better? But here's a challenge, and here's the outcome. The ultimate outcome is as a result of whatever the thing that had imprisoned Christine, the thing that had held Christine. Christine has now transitioned by renewing her mind. She renewed her mind. She's now transformed her life. But what is the outcome of her having transformed her life? Well, she's gone from an imprisonment perspective to an empowerment perspective. In other words, that thing that once bittered her or caused her to be embittered has now empowered her. And she's become an advocate for the very thing that was sent to destroy her. Isn't that amazing?
Mm. And it's interesting because you named your book Life in the Second Half, and you based it more on premises of playing games like football and basketball and that stuff, but it applies to life. Why is the second half of the game more important than the first half?
Well, the second half of the game, the second half of life, there is no point or particular place or time that you can point to and say this is the second half. It's personal. It is a personal challenge to identify your second half. First of all, we have to identify our first half. Whatever that mistake, perhaps it wasn't a mistake. There's somebody in the audience who's saying, that's looking at this video now and saying, well, I don't even like sports. Good. But I hope you like life, because life is a game. So whether you like the analogies of the football and the basketball, let us entertain the fact that if we don't pick up and own our mistakes, own our challenges, we will continue to lose in the first half. And there are no excuses. Your socioeconomic status, your skin color, where you live, who you were born to, none of that matters. All of those are tools that were given to you to challenge you to be better. And here it is. What do you mean, David? Well, I could have said it simply this way. Little people get little problems. Big people get big problems. Now, base your problem, measure your problem, and determine who you are. If you have a little problem and you're satisfied with a little problem, that simply says perhaps you are a little person. But if you have a problem that appears insurmountable, you don't know what to do, suicidal thoughts, everybody's talking about you, that might mean, and my grandfather said it this way, Christine, they only throw at the tree that has something on it that they want.
Is it more of a personality way of looking at problems?
Well, it's certainly a valid question, and I would simply say that again, my grandfather told the story one time, and I tell a lot of his stories as my own now. But he reminded me one day we had gone to get some supplies, and we were at a supply store, wood, lumber, supplies everywhere. And he says, David, He said, Junior, do you understand how they determine which wood or what wood is going to be used on a project? Of course, I didn't know. I said, no, sir. He said, well, they pressure tested. They pressure tested. And I know Christine is looking like I was looking in. What in the world is pressure testing? Well, they take the wood and they challenge and test the strength of the wood to determine how strong and how durable that wood will be. And based on the durability or the strength of that wood, it determines which projects that it will go to. Some wood isn't capable of holding big buildings. Some wood is only capable of holding small projects. And so such is life. There are some people that aren't capable of handling big problems. And there are some people that are only set aside, were only designed and divine to handle small problems. Again, big people get big problems, little people get little problems, but we all have challenges.
And what I loved yesterday that you mentioned that was glorious is you said, you know, we can often go through negative times and see things negatively about ourselves and other things outside. But you mentioned something, a beautiful metaphor for cameras and exposure on how to blast open into lightness from darkness. Share that story. I thought it was fabulous.
Well, we had mentioned yesterday that that was a device years ago. We don't see them as much as we once did. And that's a camera, and they had several different types of cameras. But around this time, they had cameras that had film that had to be developed. It had to be processed in order for the film, in order for the pictures to be produced. And the thing that I was sharing yesterday was, it is amazing that the camera can only produce or develop, the film, I apologize, can only produce or develop what the camera has been exposed to. And the key to the exposure of the film that is in the camera is that the film be exposed to light. And so we take that scenario and apply it to life, in that we have people that have never traveled outside of their county, their community, their city, their state perhaps. And so their opinion of anything will be solely the opinion they have received from others. But when you are exposed to languages, different cultures, different people, it exposes you and it lends light. It enlightens you to the fact that there can be differences. And I was saying yesterday, in the exposure, in piggybacking on the exposure scenario, we have to be exposed to certain things. Even if we discover that we don't like it, we have to at least minimum research it and find out if it is something that can benefit us, or if it is in fact something that we should discard. But a lot of times I think we discard things that could prove beneficial to us because we haven't given it proper research.
This was about the part that we talked about people and citizens having less animosity towards each other, getting along better, because there's been a lot of plurality around the country with different points of view and such. And that's the point in which we got to thinking or talking in our discussion that if people were to examine other points of view and not readily throw them in the garbage, but look at them and clearly put them, as you said, before the exposure and see what stands out as something that could be used or relevant, or something that should be chucked and not relevant. But just to take all information and examine it more fully so that we can all begin to have a better understanding of each other's point of view, because a lot of times each of our point of view aren't totally wrong or totally right. And that's the thing. I think I told you yesterday, we had a journalist come on last year who said to me, people seem to think there's either one side of the story or the other, A or B. And he said, really, as a journalist for many years, I see there's not A or B, there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's like, it's multiple angles to a story. So right. It behooves us all to really just look deeply at a subject and really begin to examine different perspectives that come our way and just not throw them in the garbage.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And my challenge to the audience is to go against the grain, experience, go and see, and if you discover it is what it was alleged to have been or what it was said to have been, then you find nothing has changed, but you might discover that you can become better or grow from being in something different or challenging yourself from a different perspective. And yesterday I was sharing with you that we not only have to learn to coexist, we have to challenge ourselves to grow back or mature back to accountability, personal accountability, integrity. If it is right, call it right. If it is wrong, call it wrong. And I was sharing on yesterday that affiliations have begun to blind us. Party affiliations has turned our country on a tailspin, and we're headed for destruction. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't wake up and gain some independence, examine views, and if your view is, if it aligns with the Democratic Party, vote on that particular issue Democrat. If it aligns with the Republican Party, vote on that particular issue according to how it is going to impact your community from a positive perspective. A lot of what I am witnessing, this is personal, this is my personal opinion and my view. I am seeing people that are voting, doing things for sheer hatred and dissension, not because they believe it, but because they feel it might injure or might do harm to another group of people. That is absolutely ludicrous. And I would almost venture to say that the outcome could not be positive for anyone, because what we have to realize is if you set your house on fire to do harm to your significant other, your husband, your wife, or whomever, you should also stop for a moment and realize that one, if you're not in the house at the moment that you set the house on fire, at some point you might not have a place to stay because you just burned down your own house. And I think much is the scenario with some of the things that we're witnessing and some of the things that I've seen lately. Policy, decisions, things that are happening not because they're gonna positively benefit our country, but because it might do harm or it might delay or deny another group of people. And that is a dangerous perspective, because here it is. If they'll do it with you, they'll do it to you. I always be mindful of that.
Wow. That's really intense, David. I'm glad you brought that up, because really people around me tend to fit themselves in a box. And we discussed yesterday, and we had a wonderful guest, I think it was 2 years, that came on, wrote a book called Life Well Lived. And basically she was just talking about the fact that we've come to the idea with political correctness that we've got to fit ourselves into a teeny box, and then wear a mask to make sure we fit that box. So at all times we look like we're the person we've decided to put out to people, whatever that person might be, the person, a Democrat who walks around like this and wears this and, only says these things. But really, none of us are a box. None of us, like any diet doesn't fit just one person.
Right.
Any closed system, any type of ideal doesn't fit one person. I find that whatever a Democratic or Republican Party might say on certain issues, some I'll agree with over here, some I'll agree with over there. So it really behooves us all to realize that, okay, we're not box people, we're not automatons. We can really have our own choice, and to really look at each of the candidates, no matter who they are. And this is the first time probably in election history where I researched every single candidate. And God bless, there was a person I met who said that he was really at odds deciding who to go with when, during the nominations and then during the election. And he said, what I did, I just stopped listening to all news. I just turned it off and I downloaded the transcripts of all the debates, and then I read them. And then after I read the transcripts, then I went back and then I listened to only the people speaking, not the media, because the media often has context that they add before they show you a certain segment. And he said, I got such a different point of view from each person doing that. And I did the same. And I really grew me a lot to see things politically by doing it that way. I began to see different things, and things became open, like the exposure we were talking about and the camera. I began to see that things were not as they seemed or as we're being told often. And I think that people could learn a lot by just, as you said, examining, going deeper, and allowing the information to unfold before them without having their mind made up.
Absolutely. And another challenge that I had an interview a couple of days ago, and I was led to share, especially in our community, it is okay to be conservative. You don't have to be a Republican to be conservative. And I pointed out that if you go back and you look at the civil rights, the pictures and the movies and the videos, perhaps from the civil rights movement, what you'll notice is men wore suits and ties, women wore dresses. A lot of the ladies had bonnets on, some of the ladies had gloves on. I said, what this represents, these all represent conservative values. And conservative simply means modesty, a person that is, attempting to conserve. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with liberals and liberal policy. You don't have to be a Democrat to be liberal, but let your choice be independent of party affiliation. Mm-hmm. Whatever your decision is, base your decision on having sat down and properly vetted whatever it is that you're pursuing, whether it be the way that you dress, who you choose to affiliate with, and if your opinion are based on facts, not propaganda, not headlines, but facts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we'll discover, and part of the challenge is with technology, technology has crippled a lot of people. And I'm not typecasting or pointing at anyone in particular, but we don't read as much as we used to.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything is instant now. We can go on the internet and Google does it all. You know, you can go and ask Google anything, but I still love books, and I still love going to the library and reading it and doing research and discovering, because once you begin to research any idea or challenge, it's going to lead in 50 different, it's almost like reading the Bible. You might start out reading a chapter, but it's going to lead you to other places, and it's going to give information in addition to what it is that you were pursuing. And it only makes you better because now you have more facts and more information.
And what's awesome about this is it really allowed you, because if you look at a lot of what they call the parties, some of them are skewed. Some of the candidates will be, in some areas will have more conservative values and some not so conservative values. So that's why I think if we really want candidates in the future, whether it be in the Congress, in the Senate, in the presidency, to reflect the people, we have to go forward and really speak our what we truly believe, not hiding behind political correctness. If we believe a certain conservative value, go out there and say, this is what I want, because whoever is hired into political office works for us. And if we keep getting fed certain things and told this is what it is, take it and eat this, instead of saying, no, I don't want to eat that, that is not my value, saying this is what I want, then we're not going to get people serving that reflect our values.
Absolutely, you're not. And what you'll discover is the conversation that we're having, there are some people that won't be excited about it because you're waking people up. You're challenging people to think, to start thinking independent of the narrative, independent of the line, the party line, independent of according to your race, independent according to where you live, independent of what mother has said, independent of what father has said. And that is not to say that anything that you've been told is negative or wrong, perhaps. But what you're doing now is researching to find out if, in fact, what you've been told is true. And again, I say, let the truth be the truth and a lie be the lie. And we have to get back to having values and having a conviction and standing up for what is right. And nobody, I can't determine for Christine what is right or what is wrong. That would be personal values, the way that you were reared, cultural values. There's so many things that enters into your truth. But the fact of the matter is, Christine knows her truth, as David knows his truth. And your truth and my truth will forever remain, our individual truths. And we have to learn to coexist. There are some things that we won't agree about or own. But that doesn't make Christine right. It doesn't make me wrong. It doesn't make David right, and so forth and so on. And when we learn to coexist, but what has happened, we become so shallow in our existence. If people don't look like me, talk like me, walk like me, I'm immediately threatened. I have to find a way to alleviate them. I want to get rid of them. I have to come up with laws and ways to. I look at even having lived abroad. My expertise in the Marine Corps was terrorism, counterterrorism. I understand terrorism, but what we also have to share about terrorism is when you look up the word terror, it is defined as fear. So when we throw out this term terrorist, do you understand what it is that you're saying? And so the word terrorist doesn't accurately describe an individual. It describes a fear, somebody who is called fright. So with that having been said, anyone can be a terrorist, Christine.
And in essence, David, what I'm seeing is often we're being the terrorist to each other, citizen against citizen. And where it begins today, everyone, and everyone listening to me continually to open and broaden my horizons and my perspective. That's what I love about Savvy, that all the different people that come here share openly their view and understanding of the world, that we all come together and are able to fully open our mind to our neighbor next door. Don't have to agree with them. Just because you listen to them doesn't mean you agree. That's one thing people seem to think. If I don't counter you and fight with you means I agree with you. That's not true. We don't have to fight to disagree. We can just state what we believe, what we know to be true from our understanding, and go forward. Examine it and take it or leave it. But, I think that is probably the key to us working together as citizenry.
Certainly agree. And we, again, coexistence. We have to learn to be comfortable enough to accept the opinion of another, that their opinion might differ. But again, make sure that your opinion or whatever your belief system is based on foundation, not fiction, not fallacy, but foundation. And if that foundation, I used to share the scenario, Christine, of I'm a jazz connoisseur. I love jazz, but jazz has never hindered me from going to a rock concert. Jazz has never hindered me from listening to country and Western music. It's never hindered me from going to a blues show. Because the thing that I understood going into either one of the concerts that I mentioned is that it doesn't change me. I'm going in to get a different experience, but hopefully this experience will cause me to further have a greater love and a greater respect for my art form. I love jazz, so when I go to a rock concert or country and Western or blues or R&B or whatever the different idea is, when I go to that concert, I come back and it gives me, again, leaving the country. If you leave the United States, you go and stay out of the United States for a year, 6 months. A vacation is good, but you don't really get the full cultural experience, the full cultural understanding of where it is that you're visiting. But I can assure you this, once you come back from having left the United States for an extended period of time, you gain a greater appreciation of what you have here in this country, i.e. liberties, i.e. freedoms, the values. I mean, there's so many things that we take for granted here in our country. And a lot of it, I believe, Christine, again, this is my opinion, is because people have never left the country.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And I don't know if you've heard the story, but there was a story I'd heard where a mother was cooking a roast for her daughter, and she was cutting off the ends. And the daughter was like, "Why do you do that?" And she's like, "Well, that's what Grandma did." And he's like, "But why?" And she's like, "I don't know. That's what Grandma did. That's how you do the roast." The daughter was very persistent. "Well, I want to know why." And they called Grandma, and Grandma's like, "Well, the pan was too small. I couldn't fit it in there."
Wow.
And I probably just an analogy of sorts, but it's going to show that often we are downloaded information from society, school, news, whatever, that you begin to think are your own thoughts, your own belief, until you examine them further and you realize, okay, what I was told was only half information. It really, truly wasn't even sitting right with my own soul. And so I think that's exactly what you're saying, that to really examine and say, is this something that truly fits with me and my understanding and my perspective, or is it something that was just told to me by my parents or my school?
Absolutely. And again, I would share with the audience that from your greatest pain comes your greatest power. And I know you wonder, what does that have to do with anything that we just shared? Well, a lot of times we're following and living the lies and living through others, or allowing others to live out their lives through us. In other words, we became a doctor because my grandfather was a doctor. I became a janitor because my grandfather was a janitor. And we don't ever discover the power within, because the power that is within was overlooked because the power came in the package of pain. And until you identify your pain, most of the time you won't identify your power. And we'll discover a lot of people that are functioning and operating under the guise. And I'm not saying that they're not successful. I'm not saying that they're not functional, but I can assure you that they haven't reached the apex of their existence because they haven't acknowledged the pain that was sent to them with power hidden in it. See, we have to be careful at the way that a thing is presented. It's not always the package, the alabaster box. Again, the focus was so on the alabaster box, but they realized it wasn't the box that was valuable. It was what was inside the box. And like we said on yesterday, until that box is broken, until you've allowed yourself to become vulnerable, to examine why you were broken and what it is that I can take from this and become powerful, and not only become powerful, but help others to become powerful. You walk around with it in you and it eats you alive. It will drive you mad if you don't address it. And you find people that are doing the same thing, dealing with the same problem 15, 20, 35, 40 years later because they missed the lesson. The life lesson is it came to empower you, not to imprison you. But until you get the lesson, you're going to continue to be imprisoned as a result of it. Wow. And I can take and drop that on a lot of subjects that come to mind, a lot of different issues that come to mind, even in our society today. And I could be argued with, I can be debated. But if you give me more than 20 minutes of coaching, I can show you where it began and I could show you how you took and misinterpreted, you allowed another person to place their stuff on you, and you're now living out that stuff as a result of something that somebody else did to you.
Before we leave, I don't want anyone to leave without finding out how they can work with you, because you've just shared some wonderful wisdom here. How can people work with you, get your book, Life in the Second Half? How can they do that?
Well, you can easily contact me on the website. My website is www.davidkjackson.com. I'm also a member of speaker.com, so you can go on there, Google my name, put my name in, and I'll come up there. I'm on Twitter at Destiny #4 Fame on Twitter. Facebook, Life in the Second Half is the books page. So I'm all over social media. Christine knows how to contact me. So if there's a meeting or an engagement or a banquet or whatever you would have that you would have us to come with, certainly, and we're willing to travel. We travel the world and love traveling. I've traveled my entire life. So bags stay packed and we're always ready to go.
It's been so phenomenal having you here sharing your wonderful wisdom on Savvy Business Radio. Thank you again.
I pray that it's been a blessing to not only you, but your listeners as well. And thank you, Savvy Radio, for the opportunity. And God bless America. And thank you again for hosting me, Christine. It's been a pleasure. It's been a blast.
Thank you.
After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/savvypatron.
Savvy Business Radio and runs in syndication on 8 AM/FM stations nationwide, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out in a bigger way, call 732-474-7375 or email Christina at savvybusinessradio.com.